You know, it's not often we get to talk about a global crisis that we actually solved, but this is a story about a silent threat, a totally shocking discovery, and this one time when every single nation on Earth agreed to act together. Okay, so remember the absolute panic about the ozone hole? If you're of a certain age, you definitely do. It was all over the news, this giant hole in our planet's protective shield, threatening, all life on Earth. But when's the last time you heard about it? So what happened? Is that thing still up there? Yeah, spoiler alert, it is. It's still there. Now, that might sound pretty bad, but hang on, because the story behind it is actually one of the most hopeful stories you'll ever hear about science and global cooperation. Seriously, let's get into it. All right, first things first, what even is ozone? Well, it's a pretty simple molecule, O3. See, the oxygen we breathe is O2. Ozone just has one extra oxygen atom tacked on. But man, that one little atom makes all the difference. It gives ozone this really sharp smell. You know, that clean kind of electric scent in the air after a big thunderstorm? Yep, that's ozone you're smelling. Okay, so where does all this ozone hang out? Well, about 90% of it is way, way up in the stratosphere. We're talking 15 to 30 kilometers above our heads, forming this super important protective layer. The other 10%, that's down here with us in the troposphere. And believe me, that difference is everything. Yeah, this is why you'll often hear the saying, ozone, good up high, bad nearby. Up in the stratosphere, it's literally our planet's shield. But down here at ground level, it's a major part of smog and a really nasty pollutant. For today, though, we're focused on the good stuff, the hero up high. So why that big deal about this thin layer of gas miles above us? Why do we call it Earth's invisible spacesuit? Well, it all comes down to what it's protecting us from. See, the sun is constantly blasting our planet with powerful ultraviolet, or UV radiation. And the ozone layer is our first line of defense. It completely blocks the absolute deadliest kind, UVC. And it absorbs most of the UVB rays. Yeah, those are the ones responsible for skin cancer. Without that shield, life as we know it just couldn't exist on the surface. Period. So what happens if this shield gets even a little bit weaker? The consequences are, well, they're staggering. Scientists ran the numbers on what would happen with just a 10% drop in our global ozone, and the results are genuinely terrifying. Just that 10% drop? According to EPA estimates, that would lead directly to a 26% spike in non-melanoma skin cancers. The link there is direct, it's proven, and it is absolutely devastating. And it's not just about our skin. That increased UV exposure would also attack our eyes, causing somewhere between 10 to 15,000 new cases of cataracts every single year. The message could not have been clearer. This protective layer is totally non-negotiable for human health. For thousands and thousands of years, the ozone layer was just fine, in this perfect natural balance. But then, about 100 years ago, we invented something everyone thought was a miracle chemical. Let me introduce you to chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs. You probably know them by the brand name Freon. And on paper, these things were perfect. I mean, look at this list. Super stable, totally non-toxic, non-flammable. They were a dream come true for everything from refrigerators and air conditioners to spray cans. So you can imagine the reaction when a couple of scientists first suggested that this perfect chemical might be ripping our atmosphere to shreds. The industry basically laughed it off. They said, that's science fiction, there's no proof. This stuff is way too heavy to even reach the stratosphere. It was just dismissed as crazy talk. But the science told a very different story. Back in 1973, two chemists, Mario Molina and Frank Rowland, published their theory. But it took another 12 years, until 1985, for the world to get terrifying proof they were right. And then, a decade after that, they finally got the Nobel Prize for their work. A long road. And that moment of discovery, it was pure chaos. When the British Antarctic Survey first saw their readings in 1985, the ozone levels were so insanely low, they just assumed their equipment was broken. I mean, the numbers were so bad, they just didn't seem possible. But it wasn't a glitch. The hole was real. And here's the kicker. It turns out NASA satellites had actually been recording these plunging ozone levels for years. But the numbers were so far off the charts, so far outside the expected range, that their computer programs were designed to automatically throw them out as errors. Can you believe that? We were completely blind to a planetary emergency happening right over our heads. And the scale of the damage, it's just breathtaking. By the time they confirmed the hole, a whopping 60% of the protective ozone layer over Antarctica was just gone during the spring. This wasn't some tiny dip. It was a massive, gaping hole in our atmosphere. That discovery sent a shock wave around the entire planet. But what happened next? That's the truly hopeful part of this whole story. The scientific proof was just so undeniable that it kicked off this unprecedented global action. In just 2 years from confirming the hole, the world came together. And the result was the Montreal Protocol. And this is a big deal. It is the first and only treaty in the history of the world to be signed and ratified by every single country on Earth. Think about that. It is, without a doubt, the single most successful environmental agreement in human history. So, the big question, did it work? Oh yeah, it worked. Now, the hole did keep growing for a bit. It peaked around the year 2000, big enough to swallow North America. But the global ban on CFCs started to kick in. And since then, slowly but surely, that hole has started to shrink. We are literally healing the planet's shield. Now look, the job isn't completely over. It turns out the chemicals we use to replace CFCs, these things called HFCs, well, they're safe for the ozone layer, but they're also incredibly powerful greenhouse gases. Whoops! So now there's a whole new global push to phase those out too. The work of protecting our atmosphere, it continues. But the big takeaway from this whole saga is just this incredibly powerful message of hope. This is hard, scientific proof that when we have to, humanity is actually capable of seeing a planet-threatening crisis, listening to the science, and coming together as a species to solve it. I mean, what an incredible success story. We identified a clear threat, we listened to the scientists, and we acted decisively as one world. And that leaves us with a really powerful question for today, doesn't it? What can the lessons we learned from saving the ozone layer teach us about confronting the massive global challenges that we face right now?